Okay, so I'm getting ready to start replacing components on this. This is a 2012 F-150 four-wheel drive. I did a video on the upper ball joint, tie rod, and lower ball joint on how to check for play. All three of those components on this vehicle have play. On the passenger side, everything's tight on the driver's side. We're also going to be replacing rotors. He's got a, whenever he not slams on the brakes, but whenever he applies the brakes, the whole front starts shaking. Part of that's probably because of the wore out components, but also I think the rotors may be glazed, so we're going to replace the rotors. And I want to show you guys a trick, what I like to do whenever I'm replacing tie rods. I'm usually pretty good about eyeballing the toe in my driveway. I don't have an alignment machine. I do this part-time, so obviously I'm going to recommend an alignment for this guy. But to save myself a bunch of headache from having to keep trying to adjust underneath, crawling underneath the vehicle and trying to adjust the toe as close as I can get it after I'm done with this, what I like to do is find the center of the ball joint. Now, if you have a grease zerk in the ball joint, like the new one, hold on, like a lot of the new ones do, like here's the new one, and it's got a hole right in the center with where the grease zerk goes. You can use that. This, I took dial calipers and measured the diameter from this ridge to here, divided that in half, and then I scribed I went across, the joint, scribed a line, and then at 90 degrees scribed another line to give me the center of that ball joint. And I don't know if you can see where I've got I took a center punch and I punched a little hole right there, just a little dimple. And you got to find a reference point on the actual inner tie rod. Get you something like these. Or anything. I mean, you could even use, well, I don't know, you probably use some calipers if you wanted, but basically what I've done, I'm getting right here in that dimple, and I've got this set to where it's right there at that first thread on the inner tie rod. So whenever I go back with this new tie rod, I'm going to use the grease zerk as my center point, and I'm going to screw it in until these calipers, until that tie rod is screwed in right to the point to where these calipers are right there at that thread. So I'm going to leave these set exactly like that. I'm going to set them to the side, and whenever I'm ready to go back in with the new tie rod, I'm going to use that to get it pretty much as close. I'll be able to lock it down, and he's going to be close enough to where he can drive this to the alignment shop without it wearing his tires or without a steering wheel being way off center, and that should get him set up pretty close. So anyway, I just wanted to share that with you. I've used that over the years, and that works really good. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I'm going to take some of the pressure off of the pads. And I'm just prying the pistons in just enough to where when I unbolt this, it'll slide off really easy. Neither one of my impacts are able to break those loose, so I'm going to use a breaker bar to break it loose. I'm probably going to be in your way. Okay. Okay, now should be back in business. I don't know what those are torqued to, but they are tight. Okay. Now you want to hang your You know what, before I do that, at least the rotors came off good. Sometimes the rotors will be stuck to the flange here, to the hub, and if you just beat on it, it'll break it loose. I'm gonna get me a 10mm. And looks like an 8mm. Okay, now you never want to hang let the rotor or the caliper hang by the lines. So I just use wire. Wire is handy for a lot of things. And this is one of them. You got a couple vacuum lines to disconnect. Okay. ABS sensor line. So this is, sometimes you can actually disconnect it right here at the hub, but I'm not going to chance breaking it right there because I don't want to have to buy another one. If you follow the wires up, there's a plug right here that you can get to. Whoops. And you can disconnect it right there at the body. And then come in here . So now this wire is completely disconnected. Whenever I pull the knuckle off, I can set the knuckle off to the side and not have to worry about it. So I've got the nut loose here. Oh, let me get this cap off. There's a nut under here we gotta take off. Most all this other stuff has been metric. Okay. So I'm going to knock this. Okay, first we're going to try hitting it right there. Okay, that popped loose real nice. I'm going to try the tie rod the same way. Okay, we'll try this one more time. Okay. Now, since I'm replacing this, I'm going to go ahead and break this loose at this time. In fact, let me put a little juice on it. Now, sometimes these are left-hand threads, sometimes they're right-hand thread. Just depends on what side of the car they're on. Okay. Okay, so I've got the tie rod pulled up out of here, so now we can pivot the knuckle. Upper ball joint's loose, so what I'm going to do now, I guess, is pivot the knuckle down, and we'll see what happens next. Okay. Okay, I don't think the half shaft's going to come out of the IWE. So I'm going to take this little hub off. I don't know if you can. This piece right here should come right off. Looks like there's 8 millimeters. Looks like 3 8mm. I'm going to take this off, and hopefully we can get this axle out of here, get it out of our way. All right. So I'm going to set that over here so that it doesn't get messed up. This F shaft. I might be able to just leave it right there. I'm going to get a rag, wrap around that. Okay, I think you can see this lower ball joint. That's the last obstacle we've got. So if there's going to be any cussing involved with this, this is the time that it's going to start happening. I don't have a good ball joint puller, so I've got the nut screwed on. We're going to start smacking it. We're going to try to smack it right here. We might hit it right here. See if we can knock that little puppy loose. All right. So now this whole thing will come on down. So here's our ball joint. So I'm going to get some more tools and we'll go after this. Okay, so you got a snap ring right here. In fact, let me Alright, so there's that. So I'm going to tap on it just to see if it's going to move at all. They usually don't. Let me get a jack. I've got a jack under it, so it should be a little bit more solid. Nothing. Okay, let me get my press. All right, I think I've got it set up the way I need it. So we're going to start hitting it with the impact and see what happens. Whenever you use one of these, make sure you got the threads greased up real nice. Okay, I've got to hold this upper control arm out of the way. Probably ought to take it off first, but not going to. Okay, so I got it to move. What I did is you saw how much tension I had on it. It was about as much as the impact could put on it. Then I got out the old trusty air hammer, a quick tap, shocked it right loose. So now we should be able to finish driving it through. And that's something that you might want to know, that if you, clearly I wouldn't have even attempted this if I didn't have this ball joint press. So before you start one of these, make sure you have one of these on hand, because you're probably going to need it. And if you do start tightening it up and you get to a point to where you just don't think that this is going to, you know, press it out, put a bunch of tension on it. And even if you just hit it with a hammer, a lot of times just that initial force and shock with the tension applied will knock it loose. Once it starts moving, then you're going to be in good shape. So let's see what happens here. All right. Get my tie rod up out of the way. Okay, so what's involved with the upper control arm? Those bolts that go through, you got a nut on this side, nut, where are we at? On that side. Gonna loosen those off, pull those bolts out. Hopefully control arm pulls right out of there. New one will go in, we'll bolt it up. Anyway, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to set the camera up. That's what I'm going to be doing. I'll leave the camera rolling so that you can kind of see what it's going to take to get those out. But I probably won't get any good close-up views, but you see what I'm doing. Taking nuts and bolts out. Pretty simple. So I'm going to break these loose to start with. Well, I say all right, let me get old Trusty hooked up here. Actually, I think they are metric. I guess I just didn't grab the right size. 13/16 does seem to work though. Okay. And as usual, okay, so it looks like, yeah, I'm gonna have to drop. I'm gonna have to at least, yeah, probably just gonna have to drop the entire strut down. Okay, so I'm gonna be up top. I'm gonna take these 3 bolts out. That's gonna allow this strut to come down. I've still got the jack under the control arm, so hopefully when I take those bolts out, I can just lower the jack. Hopefully it'll come down far enough where I can get those bolts out. Then we can just lift it back up there the same way. And it looks like we might have to disconnect the sway bar link. Okay, so I had to, where are we at here? Disconnect the sway bar link right here. And that loosens it up enough to where I should be able to push it down far enough. At least that's the theory. Oh. I'm a little pissed off at Ford right now, by the way, because this should not be this big of an issue. Okay, there's one bolt. There's the other bolt. And there's the control. See where that boot's all ripped? Alright, so the question is there any way I can pry this down? I mean, I guess the nice thing about it is you don't have to have a press for the upper ball joints. I'm tempted to put the bolts in the other way. I mean, it looked like there would be plenty of clearance, but you know what? I don't know if there would be or not, so I better not do it. There we go. So what I'm doing on the bottom is I've got a pry bar. I'm just kind of sticking in, finding a spot, sticking in so I can pry down on it. And it's a good idea, see, to save yourself some headache. Try to put this, whenever you tighten it up, it's probably going to pinch it to where it doesn't freely move like this, because the bushings, the rubber bushings are all sandwiched in there. You don't want to tighten it up with it way up or way down, because then you're really fighting yourself. So this is roughly where that rides. So that's about where I want to try to have it whenever everything tightens up on it. There we go. I'll just do it just like that. Reverse my ratchet after I put air to it. Where is my air? Here it is. Okay. Wrench. I'm going to tighten those up with the wrench. That should be good. All right. See what I mean by that nut? It's not free now because the rubber bushings are sandwiched. So you want to make sure that that's roughly where you're going to want it. Okay, so now what I think I'm going to do is use the jack to just lift that up enough to where it that's your stabilizer link. Make sure your holes are lined up. There they go. Okay, I'm gonna go up top, put these bolts in up here, then I'll be back down. Okay, so that pretty much takes care of the top end. Oh, we still got to do the tie rod. So let me go ahead and get in position to show you that. Okay, hopefully you can see this okay. So you have some flats back here for a wrench, and when you're doing an alignment you can put a wrench on there and you can turn this and it turns the center tie rod in and out to lengthen or shorten this whole tie rod assembly to align your toe. Gives you your toe in, your toe out. I've lightly clamped on to this shaft with vice grips just to make it easier for me. I could have also put a wrench on there to hold that, but this way I don't have to fumble with taking a wrench on and off. So I've got vice grips clamped onto the tie rod here, the outer tie rod, and vice grips clamped onto the inner tie rod. So all we're going to do is just unscrew these. Sometimes you don't even need to clamp this. It depends on how rusted up and stuff these threads are. Okay, so there's the old one. When I get to that nut, I know I should be pretty close. I'm going to go ahead and put this grease zerk in. What is that? Save myself a trip to the toolbox. We're just going to. That's about all that needs. Okay, now remember my trick that I showed you? Okay. So right there, I don't know if you can see that. So I've got the center of this grease zerk, and my calipers are hitting right there on that last thread. So as far as the length of this, it's right there. Let when he takes it to the alignment shop, they'll tweak this and they'll get that perfect adjustment. But this is going to save me. I should not have to, once I get this hooked up and I snug this down, that nut, I shouldn't have to worry about whether he's got so much toe in or toe out that it's just going to wear his tires out in a day or two. He'll be able to drive this for a few days if he needs to before he makes it to the alignment shop to have that checked. Because this tie rod is about as close as the old one was. Okay, so I'm going to clean this inner hole up for on the lower control arm. Let me get you repositioned here. Where's that? I'm going to give me some sandpaper, clean this up so that we can start pressing that ball joint in. Got the new ball joint. Just checking to make sure it's the right. So that does go through there. This has got two different, if you see how it's a little bigger here than a little shallower there, this has actually got two different size press fits. I've cleaned this up with some Scotch-Brite. Couple taps to hold it in there, and now it's time to see if we can get this put together. And I've got, so this piece right here is on the flange. Let me grab that old ball joint. You kind of need to pay attention to where you're pressing. So the ball joint's in there like that. This adapter spacer is pressing right here on this flange. Hopefully you can see that. So it's pressing on that. This is sitting over this cup, or rather I guess the ball joint is sitting over the cup, so whenever it presses up in there, it'll have a place to come up. Now once I start this, if it feels like it's getting tight, I'm going to back off and make sure that this part here is going inside here, because it's a little tighter than what I'd rather it be. So let's see what we got here. And yeah, if I remember right, I had to hold the arm up out of the way. Hold on, technical difficulties. There we go. Okay, one ball joint pressed in. Okay, we got a snap ring around here somewhere. You got to watch these snap rings sometimes. Sometimes they're beveled on one end, on one side, and straight on the other. I think it's just where they stamp them out, but they might actually have a reason other than that to do that. All right, there it went. Okay, so new lower ball joint, new tie rod, new upper control arm because of the ball joint. So now we're going to start going back together. Let me find my piece of wire. That way I don't have to fight. This tie rod. This is just baling wire too, by the way. That I like using it because it comes in handy for so many different things. Of course, I got it on the wrong. They make these hooks. The problem with them is sometimes you can't find a place to hook it, so they either need to be longer or shorter or whatever. Okay, I'm gonna grab me some grease. We'll grease this up a little bit. Okay, so it should kind of hang just like that. Grab this IWE. Okay, so I'm going to slide this on. Angle that down in there. This plastic cap, you can't see that. The plastic cap off the upper ball joint, you can chunk. Okay, so what I've got right now, I've got the upper, ball joint hooked up, loose. Got the lower ball joint hooked up loose. Got the axle shaft started loose. I'll go ahead and hook the tie rod up. loose. Everything loose. Okay, so there's the tie rod. You go back over here. Okay, make sure that whenever you're putting all this together that everything's lined up, the splines are engaged before you start tightening things up. Okay, there's your 8mm. I'll be right back. Okay, so I'm going to tighten up the bolts to the IWE. So these aftermarket ones, well, you didn't get to see that. I didn't have the camera aimed up there. So I just tightened up the upper ball joint. These aftermarket ones have cotter pins. So you tighten them up to about where they need to be, and then you keep going until a cotter pin hole lines up. And then you cotter pin it. And I see my battery light's about to die, so I'm going to cotter pin this and go change the battery out. I'll leave it going until the battery dies. Let's see. Being an aircraft mechanic, I'm cotter pinning this the way you do on airplanes. You can do it around this way, or you can do it like that there. Either way is acceptable. Ain't no way for that to back off. Okay, I'm gonna go get a battery, and I'll be back, and we'll button this thing up. Only thing that's left is the tie rod, lower ball joint. We'll put the nut on right here for the axle. And again, make sure that everything is lined up. And turning right. All right, I'm gonna go swap the battery before it dies. Okay, well, I'm gonna have to make it quick because my second battery wasn't fully charged yet. So while that was doing a little charging, I went ahead, I tightened I can't remember where I left off, but so we got the upper ball joint tight, got it cotter pinned. I've got the tie rod tight and cotter pinned. The lower ball joint's tight, does not have a cotter pin. It's a self-locking nut. Got the new rotor on, got a little greasy, so I'm going to clean it up. And got the caliper on. So we're pretty much done here. That all took maybe 15 or 20 minutes off camera. So now what we got is these right here. The brake line bracket, ABS wire bracket. We'll hook up the vacuum lines to the IWE and double check everything and put the wheel back on. Always make sure that that you pump the brakes, because you remember I spread the brakes apart a little bit so that I could get these calipers off. You don't want to put it in gear and end up not having brakes for a second because you didn't pump them. Okay. Okay, so the vacuum lines are hooked up. When you hear that, it means you've been a backing plate. Sometimes when you're working on suspension stuff, brake stuff, steering stuff, the thin backing plate right here on the back of the rotor, you know, if you put some pressure on it, they bend real easy. So you want to make sure that you turn the wheel before you put everything back together, because if it is bent, it's a lot easier to bend it back with the wheel off. And before I do anything else, where's my rag at? You don't want any grease or oil on the rotor. I don't know if you saw me put this in or not. The cap, it's just a dust cap. Just put it on there, tap it a little bit with a ball peen hammer, and it taps right in. It's just a press fit. So that's about it. Let me get the camera off here. We'll just kind of double check everything. Oops. So for the upper control arm, to replace the upper ball joint, you got those bolts up there, and I've got those tightened. Oh, I see something I forgot already. See the little wire deal? There's just a hole that it pushes in. That might be the wrong hole. Get a little bit of light. There we go. Okay. Now the only other thing I'm going to do, and I'll probably do it off camera, the tape that the factory used to tape this harness, right here, it fell off. So I'm just going to get some zip ties, and I'm going to zip tie those back on there. But I think everything else is done. The vacuum lines right there. Tie rod. I tightened that jam nut up. Don't know if you saw that or not. So I'm going to put the wheel back on. Everything's cotter pinned. Everything's tight. I'm going to put the wheel back on and call this job done. I haven't looked at the time. I think this is taking me about 3 hours, I'm thinking. Maybe 2.5. That was upper control arm because of the ball joint, tie rod, lower ball joint. And I put new rotors on. I already put the other rotor on over there. Whenever I was trying to get the battery charged up as much as possible, so I threw that rotor on, went ahead and put some of this together. Since you saw it being taken apart, I figured you probably could figure out how to put it back together. But and then I just went in and got the battery and put it in and finish it off with that. So that's pretty much it. Got a mess of tools I got to get all cleaned up and put up and get the wheel back on. Get this thing off jack stands and going to call it a day. This was 2012 Ford, and I think from like 2004 to 2014 or 15 you're looking at the same deal. If yours is not a four-wheel drive, this would have been an easier job. You would not have had to worry about the axle, you know, and any of that. So it would have been a little bit easier. But anyway, I'm out. You guys take care.